His commute can be a bit of a wild card at times.
Because he's going with the traffic.
Yeah. Okay, YouTube is good. Okay. Sorry, Melissa. I see the notification now. All right, I'm good if you are, Ed. Let's
Okay. All right, very good. Good evening and welcome to the December 2nd regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Esther, can I get you to call roll, please?
Happy to. Let's start with Mayor Harry W. Rilling. Okay.
Hi,
Mr.
everybody.
Abrams,
Here.
Mr. Camacho, Mr. Constant,
Here.
Mr. Jelleret,
Here.
Mr. Kasimis, and Ms. Yang.
Here.
And that means there's 4 and there's a quorum.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Our first order of business tonight is approval of the minutes from our November 4th meeting. Can I get somebody to please move that item for discussion?
So moved, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Any changes, amendments, revisions to the minutes as presented in our package? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved. There are no special appropriations on the agenda this evening, but there is one transfer item on page 9 of our package. Can I get someone to please move that item for review, discussion, and then approval?
Yes, so moved, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Tom, do you want to walk us through this transfer?
Yeah, so this one is for just under $43,000, slightly different from what we normally see in that it is a transfer directly from the general fund rather than from another account. And the reason for that is for a cleaner audit trail. We don't often see these. They have been done in the past, generally with the Board of Education. But to give you a little bit more background, we've got Mickey Dosimo on the line. If you'd like to take it away, Mickey.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for hearing me. So, over the years, we've had some money in really small pieces that has accumulated in our property room. It was change and dollars that we have, confiscated. It was either never claimed or it was in too small to be dispersed. And one day, myself, Lieutenant O'Connor, who was in charge of the property room at that time, 2 members of the controller's office, Karen and Chitsame, we spent the whole day at the bank counting it, verifying it. It was then put into a revenue fund, until which time we were going to ask permission to use it. Recently, I'm going to say about a month ago, I contacted Director Ellis that we wanted to use it for really to combat the rising price of ammunition. And, I just called to everyone's attention that we budget a year and a half ahead of time. So although we try to account for cost of living increases and just price increases, it's sometimes impossible to predict how much things will go up. So I forwarded a formal request to use the money, and now it's being transferred, or the request is to be put into the account where I can spend it. And that's kind of the history of this request.
Thank you. And let me interrupt for 1 minute to make sure the record indicates that Ed Camacho did join the meeting at 6:34 p.m. Good evening, Ed. All right. And Mickey, if I understand it, this money was actually transferred into the general fund. My words, nobody else's, almost by accident, right? It should have stayed within the police department budget, but it somehow got transferred to the general fund. So we're just putting back within your budget money that was there to begin with. Tom,
Yeah, exactly.
Jared?
I'm not sure the mechanics of how it ended up where it is, but the bottom line is it wasn't a revenue fund. It's now just in the general revenue fund, and it's just we're asking to be put back into a spot where I can spend it.
My understanding is that it does go into the general fund, and that's where it ends up. And then so the request is to take it out of that fund because it's generated by the police department.
Yep.
My question is the cost of ammunition increasing for the bad guys too?
They get a better discount than I do, although I buy in bulk. But I'll have to check with a few people we have at the station.
All right.
Additional questions on this transfer request? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the request as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The transfer is approved. Thank you very much, Mickey, for the explanation.
Thank you, everyone.
Have
Have
a-
a wonderful holidays if I don't talk to you.
Yes, you too. Next on our agenda is an update on the contingency tracker. Tom, do you want to take us through that? And it's on page 13 of our package.
Sure. As of today, December 2nd, we have no requests from contingency. And our balance is currently $2.4 million remaining. And again, I'll remind everybody that there are some extra funds in there for the ongoing labor negotiations. So hopefully those will be settled soon. And whatever they end up settling at, we will do a significant amount of transfers to make all of the individual departments whole for their full-time wages and salaries account. But for now, we're at 2.4 million. I will say that the registrar of voters is continuing to gather up all of their expenses from the presidential election, and that will be, if not 200 grand, pretty darn close. So hopefully we'll have those final actuals by the time we do the next meeting, which will be Monday, January 6th. So expect a significant amount for that meeting.
Is Tom, that's Troy, did you say 200,000 for the elections committee?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
expected or was that expected?
Well, we weren't exactly sure what to expect, largely because of the early voting. So keep in mind, there was 14 days of early voting. I just looked up before this meeting. For anybody who's been to polling sites, you know that there are police officers there. We have $82,000 in overtime just for the police for those 14 days at all the different polling sites that were, well, I should say the early
Yeah, the
voting was
14 days was just at City Hall, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, but that's a full-time officer practically on overtime, just about all 14 of those days. And then the actual election day, I think there's at least 7 or 8 different voting facilities. So, I mean, that's just one thing. So on top of that, we have to contract with the Department of Public Works to load up all of the voting machines and deliver them to the different polling locations. So there's a fair amount of work to do, plus the labor, the temporary employees that we hire to staff all these things, all the different sites. So on top of having them here at City Hall for 13 days.
I have a question. Does it have to be overtime pay when police are hired, or could it just be regular?
Well, in a perfect world, it would be regular, but given that the police are usually getting tugged in a number of different directions, including school resources officers, the construction sites, which are paid by the construction companies, not by the city, but generally we don't have the luxury or flexibility to pay straight time. We do where we can, but they usually are running pretty frantically to try to make sure everything is properly staffed.
Mhm.
So,
Okay,
so Tom, you're saying we didn't have did we have a projected amount for that? I mean, I'm just, that the number just seems a little large, that's all.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, last year when we went through, the budget process, we kept it pretty lean and consistent with the caveat that
Yeah, we knew it was gonna be.
we would expect them to come back to us.
Right.
And now that we have a bit more history with the early voting, we can come up with a per day projection, if you will. The other thing that they can't control is how many elections they have, right? So if there's councilman who challenges via a primary, well, suddenly they have work to do, right? And which they have to staff and maintain. So it's difficult to predict how many. Well, obviously we know the state elections and the local elections and the federal, but these sort of one-off primaries are difficult to predict, if you will.
but to your point, Tom, hopefully by our next meeting, we'll get all the detail then, be
Yeah.
able to review it and understand it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody seems to be for early voting. It was less stressful and straining on the actual election day, but comes with a cost.
It does. It does. Any other questions on the contingency tracker?
My understanding was that it was really quite difficult on election day. I think that the registrar of voters had to let the people go at 11 o'clock at night, even though there were ballots that were uncounted. And they had to come back the next morning to continue to count those, the absentee ballots or the early voting ballots. So it was really quite difficult. And they worked very long hours on election day. So we need to factor that in next time around.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Ed. The absentee ballots were coming in, but they weren't allowed to open them until the election day. So, yeah, significant effort there.
Mhm. Okay, other questions related to this or the rest of the contingency tracker? Also in our package tonight was an update on the school construction program. I believe we've agreed that we're going to start to review that, Oak Hills and the tax assessors on a quarterly basis. Tom, Jared, I haven't seen from you yet, and I'd like to get it out to this group this week if we can. Kind of what we want is a rotational schedule on those things, so we can understand and anticipate which meetings will cover which topics live. But is there an update, Jared, that you and or Tom want to provide on the materials that were in our package tonight related to the school construction program? Or are there questions from those who have reviewed those materials?
I don't have an update on that. I'm not aware of what we had talked about was doing a quarterly update and then updating you as our big developments with regard to school construction. And so we're going to stick to that. I don't have any additional new information that's changed from the last update last month that Alan did and Jim Giuliano did.
Okay.
So my thought was that we would line these the quarterly reports up with kind of the traditional year, so that we would cover, let's say in January, we'll cover between October and December, the months between October and December, and continue along those lines where we would have a 1 month lag between a typical quarter.
That seems fine. I'd just like to get that calendar published, please.
Sure.
And in that review, we'll have that cash flow update in terms of
Yes.
expenditures and,
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Yep. And then we would talk to, we'll circle back with the tax collector and assessor that there may be certain key touch points, dates, when they would like to give you an update that maybe don't align with the regularly scheduled meeting. And so we'll put together that schedule as well.
So should we tentatively plan for the January 6th one to have all three representatives to speak to sort of cover the half year state of the
Yeah, I think that's great
city?
from my standpoint.
That seems appropriate. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, let's plan on that. And then to your point, Tom and Jared, if in speaking to the tax assessor's office, the Oak Hills Authority, if there's any reason or it makes any sense to stagger the updates, that's acceptable too. Again, I just would like to have it all so we can set expectations among everybody.
Yeah, and I would just add, yeah, that sounds fine. Quarterly's fine. But obviously, if anything happens that we are unaware of or any surprises, I would definitely like more
Yes.
information more readily than quarterly.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said when we agreed to move to quarterly, if there is anything of substance that has more immediacy to it, it is still a requirement of those folks to come before this board.
Thank you. And I would ask Jared tonight, just, you don't have, I mean, I know we're not doing a full review, but you don't know of anything that's, everything seems to be moving along as planned as of this date.
Are you talking about
For
school
both
construction?
projects, for both school projects,
Yeah, I haven't heard any
South
change.
Norwalk and Norwalk High School.
Yeah, no changes compared to what we heard last month.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Any other questions about anything that is in our package this evening?
Yes, I'm looking at the school project update under Norwalk High School. Under budget, there's a second line, which is additional city funds, GMP number 2. What is that?
It's on page 20, right?
Yes,
Of the
20,
packet.
yes.
Uh,
give me 1 second. Which page, which project are you looking at?
It's,
Norwalk High School P-TECH, it's page 20 of our package, page 20 of 84. Or it may show up as page 21 of 85 based on the cover letter.
it's a budget of 6.5 million of hard costs.
If I remember correctly, I believe that was related to acquisition of properties. But I can double check that.
If you would please, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense as it would be acquisition of properties for Norwalk High. Because that's being built on.
No,
the
you're right. You're right.
property.
Yes, excuse me. Yeah, you're right.
Any sense GMP stands for? General,
No, it's guaranteed maximum price.
got it. Okay.
But if Jared, if you could get back to this group via email with what that 6.5 includes, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. Yep.
I also have a question further on the HVAC upgrades. So these have all been approved in terms of the budget, Norwalk's costs, and what we're going to get reimbursed from the state. And the projects are in process. Do we have a sense of completion date and timing, and also making sure that we've locked in on the reimbursement?
We know that up until, when we found out about it, everything was approved, that there was going to be about a year to 18 months worth of design work being done. And so the construction, we suspect, is going to start probably right around the beginning of next fiscal year, July, August, sometime in there. And that they would, part of it depends on just, when they can, when they can, and how many different contractors there will be for each of these projects.
Yeah, so
But I believe the time frame is somewhere between 18 months and 2 years. We do have, there is a limit, there's a time limit on the grant. And so I know that the schools are already looking into getting an extension on there, which is not uncommon. And so we expect with projects, this many projects, that we will probably need some kind of extension on these.
So, Jared, what I'd like to suggest, since we're going to review this with Alan and the broader team next month, that in addition to focusing on the new school build outs, the high school and the South Norwalk School, to Ann's request, we get an update on timing on all of the HVAC and other projects, what is likely to be completed in time, what is likely to require extensions, etc. Let's just make that all part of the update next month, please.
Sure.
Can we also get an understanding of what these grants are? Are these state grants? Is any portion of them a federal pass-through? So it's just purely from the state coffers.
These are state grants.
Okay, so it's just purely from.
It's a single state grant program.
Okay, so it doesn't encompass any federal.
No, and this started on the heels of COVID, when there was a keen interest in improving the air quality in schools, and so that's when the state ramped up this program.
And is that money kind of locked away, or could it, if there were budgetary issues, get cut back?
This is pretty much locked away. We have an agreement with the state for this money.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Seeing none, we've moved through our agenda fairly quickly this evening. Thank you all for that. Any last comments from anyone before we adjourn?
Yes, I would like to, I understand that you're pretty close to finishing up your annual report. I would like to have, at some point in time, a session, whether it's offline or not, just to walk through the financial statements, to better understand how they all flow together, since the governmental accounting is very different from corporate accounting. So in particular, having it start with understanding revenues and then how the expenditures are classified.
And do you view this as simply an educational session for the board, or are you expecting an outcome from it? I just want to make sure that we're clear on the expectation.
Well, I think part of the education would be understanding the financials more, and there might be action items that come out of it. So I'm happy to do it individually with Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Ellis, but I think it would be useful for all of us to understand what I'm looking at it right now, and it's an enormous piece of work that you guys all do, but just how the Capital Projects Fund, just walking through the exhibits, so that way we will be better educated as to the finances of the city. So it's whomever's call.
Yep. So I would prefer to do it as a board. Jared, Tom, let's discuss when you'd be ready to work through something like that. And whether we do it in one of our regular meetings or whether we have to have a separate educational session on something like that.
Isn't that done in the ordinary course, though? Isn't that what the presentation is all about?
No,
The
I'm talking,
presentation is a pretty good education on how the thing is put together and so on and so forth.
I'm talking about the financial report, the audited.
Oh, the audit report and how we got to a AAA or something like that.
No, I just want to understand how this all flows. I'm
I mean,
pretty,
my sense is that that's a big ask of the finance department, but if the finance department wants to do it, they want to do it. But that's a big ask. That's and probably beyond the scope of what we do. But that's just my opinion.
Can I do this, since this is a new request? Let me talk to Chitsme, because I know you talked about me and Tom doing it, but really it's the comptroller's office that the annual financial report falls under and does 95% of the work, probably more than that, and making sure credits given where it's due. So Chitsme would be the one to probably do most of the presentation on this. So let me, if I could confer with her, and we'll get a sense of when we'll have the final completed, and figure out a date, and kind of go through a framework of what that presentation would look like, and what kind of information you would want to see and we could give you.
Yep. And to Mr. Camacho's point, Jared, understanding the degree of difficulty or how heavy a lift that would be is also part of the consideration here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
well, I would actually suggest maybe that it's not done in like a half hour or an hour meeting format, but we actually sit down around a conference room table with these as
Again, Ann, I would defer to what Chitsame can and is willing to present to us, right? And recognize that being more informed as a board is important, but there are limitations as to our span of control and scope. And I don't want to put people through the ringer for something that is not something that we as a board can in any way action.
I believe that this is general due diligence on the financial reports and the financial.
Which is why it is published and you have access to it. And if there are general questions, that's fine. But to ask for, and we don't know yet, so I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do this, but we need to be respectful of the employees of the city's time, the value that it will provide. And as long as it can be done in a manageable fashion, let's do this. But I'm not going to condone an 8-hour deep dive into things that we can't action. That's all I'm saying.
Given the care that goes into filing the annual report, which is indicative of the financial state of the city, which the rating agencies will use, who the bond investors review, I think it is within our purview and it is within our fiduciary duty to have a due diligence on these kinds of numbers.
I respectfully disagree. That is not the mission and oversight of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. That is the responsibility of the city CFO and the finance department. If you would like to apply for that role, by all means, but I will stick by the fact that you made a request. Let's find out how difficult it is to answer that request and the return on that investment of time, if you would. If this is something that is relatively simple, by all means. If this is going to eat up hours and hours of employee time, I question the value. We don't know the answer to that. Let's get the answer to that question and move from there.
Ed, I'd like to jump in as Troy. Uh, okay. I think what is being asked for is very reasonable, and I think a high-level review of the financial statements that we handle should be something that shouldn't take much time for the CFO or Jared to review with us. I think some of us have banking backgrounds and a look at financials, but a high-level review is not going to require somebody to put together a 20-hour deck. Okay. So I think the request is very reasonable. We're not reviewing anything, meaning we're not changing any audit. We're not doing an audit. I think just a review, just to walk through it. It should take, like Ann said, probably no more than a half hour. I would think.
No, I've heard two different things, Troy. You and I are on the same point of this should be a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour review on update.
Well, that's
I
not
hear
what you
Ms.
said.
Yang
That's not what
talking
you
about
said.
sitting around a conference table
Ed, that's not
going
what you.
deep on this.
Excuse me, Ed. That's not what you said. Okay, I agree with what you just said there. Meaning, a quick review, high-level review, is something I would have. I think it will help us all.
Don't disagree with that. And I'm sorry if how I communicated it the
That's
first time didn't state that. Right? Okay. So Jared, you'll get back to us on this.
Yep.
I also have another question, which is, what is the guidance being given to the departments in terms of anticipated increases that they should be looking at or anticipated cuts to their budgets?
I'll take that. Yeah, it was 2.5%, Ann, which is a steep ask given that the contractual salary increases are 2.35% plus steps. So in some cases it's 3-ish just for your full-time salary. So in order to get down to 2.5 for an overall department target, that would necessitate cutting other line items to make up for the salaries.
Right, but that also plays on top of, unless the commercial residential real estate mix has changed. If it hasn't, that plays on top of 8% increase in assessment based upon what we did with the phase-in. So to the consumer, the taxpayer, we're talking about 10.5%.
It's we don't have final numbers yet, but we're chasing a couple things. One is the grand list. We have Paul Gorman on the case to get an accurate assessment of the increases on the commercial properties. And we're also, much like last year, seeking out the one-time revenue opportunities. We had a couple of lawsuits last year that we expect to be paid for this year. So we're asking all the division chiefs to turn over every stone to try to find other one-off opportunities for revenue.
And I'll remind us as a board that with the phase-in that we approved, the models we built all assumed approximately a 3% budget increase over the course of the phase-in. So it's good to see, at least for now on the city side, guidance was under that.
And I would disagree with that. It's not clear to me that we did not account for an increase in the budget.
If you go back and look at the minutes, and we did.
Yeah.
All of the
Is there anything else?
models show that-
Because I think we're going around in circles. I think we're done with whatever we need to do. If you guys want to continue this conversation, that's fine, but I'm tired. So
Ed, if I just want to make one point. And there's not going to be any kind of wholesale change in the allocation between commercial and residential, because we just did the revaluation, and so you won't see any kind of large movements until the next revaluation, 3.5, 4 years from now. So there, as Tom mentioned, there are some larger commercial developments that are in line, and those will be evaluated in the interim as they move along. And so those will affect it, but there won't be any major changes in that split between the residential and commercial.
And I understand, and I think that's a fair point. I just want to, just, the whole phase-in was premised on the hope that we're going to, so just to make sure that we're on top of looking at what that shift is.
And we will go through all of that during the budget review processes.
Also, in January, can we have a sense of what kind of revenues are at risk from the federal government and the state government?
So
I will
again,
let Jared and Tom take that request back and figure out the right timing for us to review that.
yeah, I think those will be, those are things as we're developing the budget that we'll take into consideration when we're doing the budget estimates for those types of revenues. And so, you know, I think we'd be happy to discuss those as we're going through the budget process and you guys are doing your reviews in the hearings.
I mean, I just, in looking at the annual report, I just don't know how that relates in any way. There's close to, call it 75 million. One is intergovernmental and the other is state on behalf of payments. So again, this gets into my question of looking at these financials and understanding the revenue sources. Because if we're at risk of, if we're at risk of losing, say, call it $10 million of payments, that $10 million has got to be made up from somewhere, and it can't.
We are discussing hypotheticals right now, Ann. You made your request. Jared and Tom will get back to us with the timing by which to review it so that it can be impact our decision making through the budgeting process. To Mr. Camacho's point, we're going in circles at this point. So if there's nothing else related to the agenda items that were on the meeting for this evening, I would like somebody to move to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion's on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.